And I pull up to the spot he tells me to pull up to, where the surprise is, and he's standing in front of. Hold on one sec, guys. Sorry, a red pickup truck, a 1990 Chevy K1500 for people who know their pickup trucks. And he's like, "Dad, I bought a car." So he went out and spent $2,200 on a 1990 pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know this, but you're not allowed to register or insure a car if you are a 16-year-old unlicensed driver. You're not even allowed to buy it. So I spent some time getting the title in my name. I basically seized this property from my son, put it in my name, got it registered, and the last thing we have to do is get it inspected. Now this thing's got some issues, got some
Got some
issues.
issues. Mm-hmm.
And on No King's Day, we were planning on going and picking it up from a shop, going to the inspection station, which is actually right near Capitol Hill, um, and then going to the festivities. Um, what happened was the shop when we got there wanted $3,000 to replace some spark plugs and a distributor. Now I don't know, I'm not a big car guy, but I've done enough research to know it doesn't cost $3,000 to replace some spark plugs and a distributor, and they'd already done the work. Uh, so this turned into a little bit of an issue. Um, Trying to explain to the shop that they probably should have called with an estimate if they were going to spend $3,000 of work on a $2,200 1990 pickup. Anyway, the funny part of the story is, as we're driving through DC trying to get this thing inspected, um, we're down by the No King's Day protests, and we're sort of finally there and seeing people. And what I had forgotten is that my son bought this car in like rural Virginia, and on the back left side, it has a bumper sticker from the guy who owned it. It's very hard to see unless you really look up close. It's really faded. And Steve, you'll be able to place the year of this bumper sticker. It says Fire Pelosi, johnboehner.com. So there I am in my red pickup truck with my baseball hat on, driving through the No Kings protests with everyone looking at this car as if uncertain if this is, someone that's gonna, be friendly or not. But anyway, we solved all those issues, and we walked around at the end of the No Kings protest, and it was just a great happy crowd, funny signs, good vibes, just everyone was so cheerful, which is, something that you point out, Steve, is to people should have optimism. They should know that, the reaction against what is happening is stronger than the administration and what they're doing. And it's really important to have days like that where people see each other face to face, not on Substack, not on social media, and are reminded about the power of the network that has formed to oppose what's going on.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of joy. I was out in Iowa City um, for a football game and did the No Kings protest out there, and it was great. Um, People in inflatable dinosaur costumes and bear costumes and marching, a lot of American flags, all of it peaceful. And it reinforces three things that are of supreme importance for people to get. One, there are more of us than there are of them. Right? I will say that again. There are more of us than there are of them, and do not be afraid of them. Um, they can't shove all of us into an ice man. And then just the way you said it about the joy, it's such a contrast. And I don't know how else to say this except to express it in my native uh colloquial patois of central New Jersey. But whether it's Pam Bondi or Christy Nome or the thug Tom Homan or the whack job sector chief Dan Bovino or Cash Patel or Carolyn Levitt, they are a collection of the most miserable motherfuckers that I have ever seen. Snarling, sneering, nasty, deranged, fucking vicious for no reason, no cause. And you got this 27 or 28-year-old child married to a senior citizen every day, every day, along with the Speaker of the House, defaming half the country. Fuck you. All right. Every one of you. All right. That we're un-American, we're traitors, we're this, or that, the abuse of power of these people, the pointing of the weapons at American citizens by Trump's secret police. Right? It was a national day of go fuck yourself. And I don't mean that in the way that it's used by MAGA. The rattlesnake is an iconic American animal, and it's on some of the earliest flags. Don't tread on me. That you're sending the army to Chicago and threatening San Francisco, and after scores of millions march, release a video of the president as a demented king flying a plane dumping shit on half the country. Like, how dare these people? How dare they desecrate these offices, these institutions that belong to us? Belongs to us. And what this weekend was about was a national dose of penicillin against cynicism, against insanity, and against these sneering assholes who got a lick of power and completely, totally, absolutely lost their minds with it.
Well, so what do we make of this video? This is a classic Trump thing where you do something that is so distasteful, so unlike any elected official, let alone the president of the United States would do. A new low, as I think some people in the comments are pointing to it. And yet in some ways totally predictable and unsurprising because he has total contempt for anyone who opposes him and doesn't care that he's actually the president of every American, and doesn't even pay lip service to the idea that he represents everyone, even Nixon, even presidents that hated their enemies, never would have governed the way that he does for just his base, for just the Americans that actually support him and hold total contempt for everyone else. And so, on the one hand, you see the MAGA defenders who obviously defend anything he does, saying, "Oh, it's just a joke. This is just funny. He's, literally shit posting. This is, why can't y'all take a joke?" On the other hand, again, just to go back to the test I always apply to these things is, what if this were happening in another country? What if you saw, given what's happened since January in this other country, and then you read in the paper that the leader, who's already uh, taking troops from donor states willing to supply them and sending them into the cities of states where the leadership doesn't want them, who's militarizing cities, who's threatening to impose the Insurrection Act, on and on and on, totally destroyed the independence of the Justice Department and weaponized federal agencies against companies and media organizations that criticize him, kicked the reporters out of the Pentagon, snatching people off the street and sending them to gulags, that whole litany of things, shutting down the government and using it as a excuse to purge the workforce and do things that are illegal during previous government shutdowns. And then you saw that the largest protests in American history, according to one estimate by I'm forgetting our colleague on Substack, Strength in Numbers, largest protests in American history, political protests. The asterisk there is Earth Day. The Earth Day protests might have been bigger, but not explicitly political. And then you see that the leader of that country, his response was to post a video of him in a fighter jet dumping shit on his own people. If this were happening elsewhere, we would be talking about whether we should intervene. We would be talking about how our State Department should be going to the UN, or making sure that there were international election monitors in the next election. We would have warnings about traveling to that country. The level of alarm, if this were another country and we were watching it, would be at 11. And yet I have seen zero condemnation of this from a single Republican elected official. And then, of course, JD Vance does something just as disgusting on Blue Sky. So we're living in this bizarre world of where the president and the vice president have taken on the tactics of what it started in 2016 with the most atrocious people on the internet. And when and these people are all now elected and running the government. But 10 years ago, when we were watching this come from the right, this kind of shit posting right, where everything was sort of ironic, it was just sort of right wing irony. We were all sort of mystified, disgusted by it. These same people have now accepted that as the norm and are running the country as, late teens, right-wing shit posters.
They're so dishonorable. There is a tediousness to constantly reasserting it. But it needs, I suppose, to be reasserted constantly. They are dishonorable, undignified people. The office of President of the United States of America was occupied by George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, by Franklin Roosevelt. The total collapse of dignity by the people who used to work themselves into a lather over the menace of Teletubbies is an extraordinary thing to behold. The total inability of anyone in the media to get an interview, right? And to ask the question of Mike Johnson or anybody, which is some version of, right, more sophisticated than I can manage, right? But it's a version of what the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? And I would sit there for 6 minutes in total silence with the guy staring at him and saying, "You call yourself a Christian. You're the Speaker of the House. No problem with it. Let's watch it again. What about now? Well, we can watch it again. We got more time." The
Yeah.
the collapse of there's always been assholes and shitheads. And this is I there I knew a guy. I knew a guy through a family connection who I remember when my son was like 15. But anyway, this guy, he would not wear pants. And he was like 30. He wore shorts. Wore shorts all the time, no exceptions. And so there was a wedding in February, and the guy shows up, it's 10 degrees out, right? And he's got his shorts on. And the concession he made is that he would change out of his shorts in the back of the church, and then he would put the shorts on after the service, right, and leave. And my son was like, "What's going on with this?" And I was like, "He's an asshole, Joey. He's an asshole, right? And there's no cure for it, but there is a cure for having assholes lead us. And these people are so unfit, so weird. Peter Thiel, right? Like, this is so important for people to understand how corrupt our system has become. JD Vance was the personal project of the greatest weirdo billionaire in the country. Peter Thiel spent 60 million, and national Republicans spent tens of millions more, and he's picked to be vice president by Donald Trump Jr. And he has no conception of the majesty of the office, the honor, the people that occupied it. In the old executive office building is the ceremonial office of the vice president, but it was the assistant secretary of the Navy's office, is FDR's office, and Teddy Roosevelt's office. And in the desk, all of the vice presidents carved their names in the drawer. You have all the Republicans, all the Democrats. And I remember when Cheney did it, he was really looking forward to it, to putting his name in there. He so idolized Gerald Ford. And, Gerald Ford's name was carved in there. All the vice presidents, George Bush, uh, all the vice presidents, Harry Truman, and he has no dignity, no class, no grace. He's a dirtbag hillbilly, like the type that grew up sucking on his meemaw's tit when he was 12 years old, like in his trailer. Just a piece of shit.
That's the
A
quote of the day.
piece of fucking shit is what he is. You want to talk about language and keeping it real and being authentic, and all of a sudden, right, you get some Democrat out there decides there's been some stories about it. I'll say fuck at a rally, right? Or right, I'll try and connect by saying something vile. It's like the way real people talk, right? And the way that men used to talk to each other, right? Like man to man, like to a JD Vance, you see people are pieces of shit, is what they are. Pieces, scumbags, scumbags. Pardoning George Santos while prosecuting your political enemies and flying this make believe airplane across the country, dropping shit on the people it's your honor to lead. Fucking disgrace. There's no words for it.
I think it would be fun in the chat for people to who went to the No Kings Day protests, or maybe if you just saw stuff online, uh, tell us what the best sign is that you saw at one of the protests. Um, I thought there was a lot of creative stuff. Steve, you were there in Iowa City.
Was.
You weren't in a dinosaur costume or anything,
No, but I
but but
almost.
but when you get worked up on something, you can seem like a T-Rex just on your own. So,
I
so any memorable signs?
I met this cute lady in her 70s who had a Grand Tifa sign. She was really sweet. Um, there were some good signs. There were a lot of really funny ones. And again, the absurdity of it, the obscenity of it, um, the
I liked.
tragedy of it, the tragedy of it all.
We can't show it, but I liked something that Miles Taylor, our colleague on Substack, posted. It was his wife Hannah's idea, and it's a play on the new Taylor Swift album, and it's the life of a show trial, and it's got a picture of Letitia James, James Comey, and John Bolton. Um, I thought that was pretty good. Um, One of the things in DC was just the diversity of the crowd. I thought was great, both in terms of the um, age, multi-generational, a lot of people with kids. Obviously, because it's DC, racial diversity, lots of people coming in from out of state, because this was going to, be one of the big ones. And the other thing, this is interesting, I think, for us to talk about, Steve. There was some people who I generally respect, who I'll use one example. All right, I want to get your take on this, Steve, and people in the comments as well. Uh, Andrew Sullivan, who is a well-known writer on Substack, someone I've known since the 1990s when we worked together at the New Republic. Um, People tend to have polarizing views about Andrew. Some people, deeply, deeply love and respect him. There are other people who not so much. I've generally admired Andrew over the years. He was the first person who really helped me understand how important same-sex marriage is, and he was writing about that in the '90s at a time when no one was. He was very brave in his defense of it. Um, but Andrew, the other day, decided that he could not participate in the No Kings protests, even though he has been intellectually very, very clear on Trump. You know, he has uh, not for a second been conned by who Trump is, understands this movement, understands this administration, and generally on Trump, I think he's excellent. But he has very strong feelings about some other issues. And he saw some signs that were associated with this protest and looked at the websites of some of the sponsors and decided he didn't agree with every issue, specifically uh, some of the trans rights issues, what he interpreted as being too permissive on immigration from some of the protesters, and he just bailed on the whole thing. And now, it's important to. I don't have his takes right in front of me, so I don't want to misquote him. But the general vibe, which I deeply, deeply disagree with, was that because some people, specifically on the left, were pushing certain issues and using these protests to push them, that he just could not associate himself and go down and march alongside those same people. I find this to be deeply, deeply uh, mistaken. Um, and I just wanted to see what you thought about that kind of coalition building, and when is the time that you're you're going to have to put a red line up or draw a red line if someone in a crowd or even a sponsoring organization um, pushes issues that you have a strong disagreement with.
Um, I read the piece that he wrote, and I don't have it in front of me. And first off, he's a brilliant guy who is a person who has tremendous moral courage
Agreed.
and is a person who's not dissuaded by the mob. And I think is probably the singularly most important person in marriage equality becoming legal in the United States.
Yeah, he was very,
And,
very important.
and
Ju-
very, very of supreme importance. There is a lot of debate in the gay community about the transgender issues,
of course.
about women's spaces, a lot of um debate. And
Yeah,
the reality is that Andrew, who played such a key role, was really shouted down from his opinions by some of these groups and people in them, and I think in an intolerant way. And the purity tests and the demands, right, are not being made by Andrew Sullivan. What I read Andrew to say, and I think is a very important thing, because I don't think you can ever judge anybody for not going to do something. And what Andrew Sullivan said was, he's like a fish, right? And he was like, I was thinking about biting on the line and actually getting out there and marching. I I thought about it and I did it. The first protest I've ever gone to was a No Kings protest. A lot of people are not naturally disposed to go out and march and protest and hold a sign. It was a high bar,
yep,
for me to get over. And so Andrew basically said I was really close. And then it was because of the Palestinian flags, right? And at the University of Iowa, there was a guy carrying a Palestinian flag dressed like he was in Hamas, right?
Yep.
Full thing on his head and everything. And I don't think he helps the cause of defeating Trump.
No.
And I think in political opposition, however you face forward, and I think Andrew Sullivan, who's a Brit by birth, right, has become thoroughly American. And he was like basically making an American expression of, hey,
And he is an American citizen.
what I hear you
Yeah.
people saying to me regarding the protest that I'm inclined to join is, hey, go fuck yourself. You're not welcome because you hold this view or that view or that view. And he felt like these groups were trying to impose their parochial view on the whole in a moment of crisis opportunistically that didn't work, right, for him as
Yeah.
somebody trying to get in. And so one of the lessons, right, of the Democrats in 2024, and I walked a mile in this, is that when I dare to say the 82-year-old guy isn't going to get reelected and we're going to have a national catastrophe, which I was right about, right? The responses were, "Oh my God, now's not the right time to say it." Though this 3 years before the election, right? You got shouted down, and you couldn't say things, and that sentiment is not a good one. And so we got to bring people in to a protest. And like when I say I don't want to see any Palestinian flags at a No Kings protest. It's an American protest. I don't want to see
Yeah.
Israeli flags. I don't want to see Russian flags. I want to see American flags. Live in the United States. We have an urgent crisis here. And so I think that you should read what Andrew said and not judge so much as opposed to listen, because Donald Trump's movement is built on the premise of you will be judged for nothing. And that's created a societal disaster when you have the vice president out excusing 30-something-year-old Nazis as errant kids, right? In these chats. The Democratic position has been, we're going to judge whether you are worthy of belonging in our protest or in our party. And that has been a disaster because the party that judges everything and everyone and says what's safe to say, what's not, what you can think, what you can't, is going to lose to the party that judges nothing ever, that has no standards, gives everybody an excuse. And so this wasn't a free speech protest where bring your cause sign. It was a no kings protest.
Yeah.
And
That
I
to
think
me,
you've got to
that's
look
a,
next to
yeah.
who you're standing next to and why they're there, and if you feel comfortable. And and if you want to have 20 million people at one of these, then that means you need to grow. And so how do you grow? And you grow by inclusion, not exclusion, which means the only symbol that should fly above any of these rallies is the American flag. And every other cause, right? Whether it's Medicare for all of these other rally issues are not the cause that inspired, I think, 7 million people to turn out in March. And so all of those distracting issues shouldn't be judged, right, as well. oh, a guy like Andrew Sullivan who says, man, that's anathema to me. And he sees us so prominent, he sees what he sees. And I think you have to meet him where he is, not the other way around.
Yeah, I have a lot of conflicting feelings about this because I think on the one hand, you could point to you're trying to build the biggest no kings coalition. The power of the no kings idea is that it's something that every American can agree with. Um, and but at the same time, I do think people who go to a protest, so again, you got to tolerate. It's going to be a big tent. You're not going to agree with everyone, and you got to welcome people into that coalition. If their issue is trans rights, and you don't agree with certain aspects of their trans rights agenda, for Andrew, it's minors and medical procedures, right? And if you don't agree with that, fine, but you want to be tolerant of them joining the coalition because you want the biggest possible coalition. And anyone who's read any of the academic literature on this in other countries, the key thing for the opposition is to join hands with political parties in parliamentary systems and activists who, frankly, in normal times, you might find you'd have deep disagreements with, and maybe even find their views repulsive. Those are the kind of coalitions that were built to uh, stop authoritarian movements in the last uh, few decades in Europe and elsewhere. So I think you have to be deeply tolerant of the people you're in a coalition with. On the other hand, I don't think it's cool to hijack protest movements with your pet issues. You know, I don't think it would be great to go to, 5 years ago to go to a BLM protest with a sign about, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some random pet issue. So on the one hand, you're sort of marching for Black Lives Matter, but on the other hand, you've got your sign about I don't know. I'm a journalist, so if I had a sign about First Amendment restrictions that I thought the administration was imposing, that would be kind of weird. And I would expect people at that protest to be like, what the fuck, man? Why are you here with that sign? And so I do think it's incumbent on the folks with the Palestinian flags and the big bright trans rights issues banners to have some understanding and respect for like what this movement is about. And so, but I think Andrew is wrong to skip the whole thing because because of those actors, and you're I've never seen, I've covered a lot of protests, especially on the left, and this is a liberal left coded protest, obviously, because the opposition is more left than right to Trump. And I've never been to one that didn't have left wing causes associated with it, because there's just a whole stream of left wing politics that is just about holding up signs, going to protests, and sees activism as fundamentally, marching in the streets and yelling. It's one of the reasons I've always been very allergic to protests, is because unless a protest has a very specific goal in mind, if you look at the civil rights era, if you look at like important protest movements that have been successful, they never launched a protest for the sake of marching and yelling and holding signs. There was always a strategic goal associated with that protest. So I think protests can be great. I also think they can be totally useless. This protest, the No Kings protest, I think has been very strategically smart, and just just from a basic strategy of letting the country and the world know how many people oppose Trump, that kind of visibility is important. If there were no other follow up, I would say it's wise. So you're not going to purge this movement of the professional activists on the left. They're always going to be there, and it's always going to be a problem. And so that's where I disagree. I disagree with Andrew's view that it
Well,
was just
I mean,
impossible for him to attend because of it.
I think like at the end of the day, like it's America. You can do whatever you want, right? And that is part of the power of this protest and part of the absurdity of pointing a rifle at somebody in a dinosaur costume, right? It's that this is fascism as farce wrapped in a reality television show, uh, super juiced cops episode for the lazy boy recliner set glued to their fucking donut and Fox News. That's what that's what this all is. And I I think that when you see these protests, they're very organic and people are turning out and they're having fun and they're sending a very, very powerful message. Now, I've spent a lot of my career as a political strategist, and I tend to look at things through that prism, like around politics. And what I find that really interesting about it is you have this organic movement, and you really don't have a democratic leader in the country yet that has been able to get their arms around it or
Yeah.
seem capable of getting their arms completely around it. Um, and so the Democratic Party right now is stuck at this national approval level at about 25%. Trump's numbers are coming down and he's in the 30s and they're going to go lower. But the Democratic numbers aren't coming up. And so I'm fascinated by that. And the boil that I see out there is it's not angry. There wasn't any anger, it seemed, at these protests, but there's a lot of anger in the country at the leaders in politics and business and technology. And I used to be very, very fascinating as this Virginia Giuffre book comes out,
Hmm.
as the Epstein list is out and really fully in the news, as you see guys like Mark Benioff playing the games that they're playing with Trump, everything it seems like is coming to a head, like something is building,
Yep.
and everyone's going to come to the realization about the moment we're in as we come to it. And what I would say is that there's a video that's making the rounds, and it shows a ICE agents in a car crashing into a another vehicle, and that took place, I think, in Chicago, and that took place on an Illinois road. And those ICE agents should be arrested for a vehicle assault on an Illinois road. I watched it play out. And Democratic governors are going to have to apply the full power of their office in defense of the most important values that we share. And they need to appreciate that the way to have the maximum support is to use the maximum powers they have in defense of civilization's maximum safeguards against tyranny, which are the provisions of the U.S. Constitution that restrain the possibility of that tyranny. And the way you bring everybody together is by talking not about any issues per se, but about the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion and the freedom to be safe in your house at night without a helicopter lowering armed men onto your roof. The freedom to not be hunted like an animal by masked Gestapo.
I'll
And
add one. Yeah.
all of that has to be at the core of what the Democrats are about. A party that can capture the imagination of ordinary people about the possibilities for there to be better days ahead. Simple as that.
Yeah. One other freedom, and we got to talk about this, Steve, and that's the freedom from being hit by shrapnel as you drive up I-5 in California. So I don't know if you saw this story, but certainly everyone knows that our wise vice president decided to use No King's Day as an opportunity to go out to Camp Pendleton in Southern California, as allegedly as a part of the Marine Corps anniversary. And the Marines were going to fire some rounds from the beach over I-5 into a landing zone at Camp Pendleton.
Heavy artillery, 155 millimeter artillery shell.
Live ammunition. And the governor of California, who you would expect might be notified of this, was outraged. There were very few details. And Governor Newsom decided to shut down 17 miles of I-5 as a precaution. And, again, this is one of those things, if you saw it in another country, you wouldn't believe it, that the federal government and a governor are having a fight over a military exercise because the federal government's just not going to tell the locals what the fuck's going on. And so here's what happened. I don't know if people have seen this yet, but JD Vance was there. I'm going to read the Washington Post's headline. Shell detonated over California highway during Marine exercise, officials say. The mishap sent shrapnel toward Interstate 5 and California Highway Patrol officers who were part of Vice President J.D. Vance's protective detail. Let me read some more. An artillery shell detonated prematurely during a U.S. Marine Corps ceremony in California over the weekend, sending shrapnel toward I-5 and California Highway Patrol officers who were part of Vice President J.D. Vance's protective detail for the live fire exercise, the California Highway Patrol said Sunday. No officers were injured in the incident. A patrol car was hit by a 2-inch piece of shrapnel, leaving a dent in its hood. One of the officers recalled hearing what he said sounded like pebbles falling on his motorcycle, according to an incident report. The live fire mishap followed a disagreement between Trump and Newsom over Newsom's decision to close the highway as a safety precaution ahead of the ceremony. The Trump administration and the Marine Corps had said that there were no public safety concerns surrounding the event. So you can't make this up. They almost killed the vice president, it sounds like. I mean, the shrapnel hit a cop's car, and they canceled further use of live ammunition after it learned of the premature detonation, the Highway Patrol said. One more quote here. This was an unusual and concerning situation, California Highway Patrol Border Division Chief Tony Coronado said in a statement. It is highly uncommon for any live fire or explosive training activity to occur over an active freeway. As a Marine myself, I have tremendous respect for our military partners, but my foremost responsibility is ensuring the safety of the people of California and the officers who protect them. What do we what do we make of this, Steve? And like
First off, the Marine Corps' birthday is in November.
the 250th anniversary, right?
Second off, the Marine Corps live fire training base is at 29 Palms out in the desert. So you don't have to fire artillery shells over the, main West Coast artery, right? So everyone's on the
Yeah,
East Coast here. It's the equivalent of shooting the artillery over I-95
exactly.
is what the I-5 is in California. And
Exactly.
so, and Gavin Newsom was proven right. And the Marine Corps couldn't fire a shell without detonating it over I-5, right? And nearly killing the vice president's security detail. And total incompetence at 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 every level. And
If we had a functioning Congress, you would have leaders lining up right now to investigate why the White House demanded that they fire live ammunition over a highway and
if,
not tell the locals about it.
if we if we had a functioning military, it wouldn't have been fired. Um, and the we don't have a functioning military,
And just one more
right?
quote. On the day of the ceremony, the Trump administration said on X that Newsom is lying about the need to close the highway and added that the Marines repeatedly said there are no public safety concerns.
The,
So,
like
so this
like
is like
Pete Hegseth is incapable of any growth. So like we just have to pray that there's not a war, right? We don't have a functioning military. We
we
don't
don't have
we
a
don't
functioning
have
FBI.
functioning military. It is obscenely and absurdly led.
I mean, honestly, the thing I fear the most about is given the what's gone on with the FBI and how the FBI has decided to become an adjunct of ICE, and
Oh,
they've got people in offices walking the beats in Washington and other cities when crime is at a historic low, and God forbid there is a terrorist attack in this country, because the FBI resources are not watching that. Things are going to be extremely, extremely bad.
oh, I just want to be so we can go back to that. There will be a terrorist attack in this country, a real one, and it will be found in the end to have been able to have been prevented, but for the incompetence of the Cash Patel FBI. I was at the Blue Jays game last night, and
How, so,
great
sorry we didn't
game,
get to that in the beginning.
but I always, and
What
I
a
go
segue.
see with my I go with my buddy up here, and Dean Blundell, and we were watching, before the national anthems, and the Mounties were there, right? So it's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police had the flags, and I was excited. I was like, oh man, I was like, it's the Mounties got the flags tonight. And we were talking about the Mounties, and we were talking about cops. And like to me, like and I was at the University of Iowa game, and two young guys on the sideline, Iowa State Patrol uniforms, state troopers, Smokey the Bear hat, shine, gun belts, dress uniform. They looked sharp, right? And it looked like you could trust them. Policemen. And it's an honorable calling. And but like I was thinking about it, Like, an FBI badge had some prestige to it. I was thinking if someone flashes me like an FBI badge, like it's a piece of fucking shit out of a Cracker Jack barrel box now. So it has no meaning. You know what has meaning to me? Like a New York City police detective shield, right? Like a detective, like a New York City cop, right? Like a state trooper. Those things have value, right? FBI has been devalued in 9 months, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Like if you don't shutter the FBI and whatever replaces it, has a new name. I mean, these
Yeah.
institutions have no credibility. I'll never trust representation made by FBI spokesperson ever again in my lifetime. And the truth is, with an agency like the FBI, it was run as a tyranny by J. Edgar Hoover. It abused the shit out of the civil rights of some of America's greatest leaders. And this is their last strike.
No. Yeah.
We're going to have some very serious conversations in this country, right, about making sure that none of this ever happens again. And that starts by utterly defanging the homeland security state that arose after 9/11. George Bush fucked up a lot of things. In Iraq and Afghanistan, there's nothing that he fucked up more than this. That the aftermath of 9/11 created this monstrosity, this homeland security state. And it's got to be completely, utterly, absolutely dismantled. And look, military careers are a long time. And you're gonna have a brigade commander, right? You're gonna have a major general. You're gonna have somebody in a chain of command who was involved in firing the shell. You put them up for Article 15 in 3 years, and you and
And,
you take away a star, you take away a rank, and it's
and you
just politics.
and you find out who in the White House, when it was brought to them that this wasn't a great idea, said, "It's fine. Go ahead, do it." Because I guarantee there were people who came to Hegseth, who came to someone and said, "These are the reasons we should not do this." And someone said, "Don't worry, it's fine." And thank God Newsom closed the highway. Who knows what would have happened if there were traffic going along there? Wouldn't and
Gavin,
there needs to be an investigation,
Gavin Newsom is not perfect, but Gavin Newsom
and no
has
politician is. So
has
anyone who's
good judgment.
I
And
mean, I don't want to give him too much credit for this. Anyone with half a brain would close a highway when you have this, clown car administration saying they're gonna fire shells over I-5. So he made the absolute
well,
right choice. Choice. Right.
I think it's deeper than that, and he deserves more credit for this because that's a
All
big
right, fair.
deal. That's a big deal to shut down an interstate
It
highway,
is. It
right?
is.
And
It's
and
absolutely.
so and so the Hegseth Jerkoff Brigade, right, is representing that we do this all the time, which they don't, and two, that it's safe to do, which it wasn't. And
I, I, I mean, can
Gavin
you?
Gavin Newsom, and this is why, by the way, you have civilian control over the military. And and so Gavin Newsom listens, and this is a really important. Gavin Newsom is going to run for president. And Gavin Newsom could be in a position where he's surrounded by all these Trump generals on day one after the military's corrupted. We got we got the sinking of these boats. Looks like we murdered a fisherman in Colombia. So we're going to have to get to the bottom of a bunch of things. And all these generals are going to be sitting around the table with the brass sparkling and the ribbon shining, and they're going to be talking bullshit. Just like the bullshit about it's safe to fire the artillery shell over I-5. And what Gavin Newsom did here is look left, look right. It's like, the fuck out of here. Of course it's not safe. And you know what? He was right.
He was right,
He was
and
right. And
absolutely.
these guys, Trump, are wrong about everything all the time. So the prices are going up. And I just want to say one last thing about this. And it's about the coalition. I was sitting at the Iowa game, and I love the University of Iowa football games, playing Penn State. And if anyone's ever been to an Iowa football game, the Children's Hospital is built up above the stadium. And University of Iowa, Iowa City is an incredible place. And they have this incredible tradition where there's a kid captain from the Children's Hospital for each game. At the end of the first quarter, everybody waves to the kids up at the Children's Hospital. And so this game begins, and the kid captain is announced, and he is a beneficiary of cutting edge medical treatment and science. And so we're in a state university game that voted for Trump, looking up at a children's hospital, waving to sick kids. When the outcome of the election, the choice was to decimate the research that's saving the life of the kid captain and the lives of the kids we're waving to. Then there's another brand that's associated with the University of Iowa. It says America Needs Farmers, ANF. And this was the ANF game. And again, the state that farmers are hurting, the tariffs are devastating, voted for Trump, and we're at a game in a state that voted for Trump, cheering the farmers while Trump's giving the Argentinian farmers a $30 billion bailout.
Who are
It's,
allowed to
it's,
sell,
a,
who are allowed to sell to China.
and it's an extraordinary duality. A lot of MAGA people are raving at the kids. A lot of MAGA people are cheering for the kid captain saved by science.
Yeah.
And as you perceive and conceive of the next marches, as the people listening, right? What are they going to do? How are you going to get involved? How are you going to be part of everything that's happening? You know, being able to reach people who have inside of them some connection to decency, all right, and are certainly not in their conduct a Christy Nome or a Bovino or a Pam Bondi. How do we reach them? How do we break through? How do you pull it back together? What words can be said? And that's the great political test of our time.
It's one of the hardest questions, and I haven't heard anyone with the answer there. The silos are so separate and defined, and people are so impervious to some of the basic facts. And the media ecosystem that's been built up by Trump on the right is so powerful and so cocooned. And I think one is make sure that you're not cocooning yourself, because it's easy to do on the left. It's easy to do in any context. And make sure you don't give up on reaching out and having conversations with people who support Trump. And there's a range of Trump supporters. There are people who are far gone and are never going to listen to you, but there are other people who are don't pay a whole lot of attention to politics and have, you know, what you might find as strange reasons for supporting Trump, but are open to understanding some of the stuff. I've had conversations with people like that very recently. In fact, one of these days I might have this see if I can get this guy on Substack because we've been having some very interesting conversations. He's a hardcore MAGA supporter from the South that I met recently. Um, but I don't have a good answer for that, Steve. But it's the question of our time, and I know some of the people who step in it on this question sometimes get attacked because there's a lot of people on the anti-Trump side who, for very understandable reasons, don't have much sympathy for anyone who voted for Trump. And I feel like that. And if we're going to pull back from the abyss and have a single country that's not totally torn apart, um, the question that you raised has to be the one that everyone works on. Um, all right, man.
Yeah,
We got
there's a lot of things to think through about that. But at the same time, right? If you're the state of Texas and you're going to need California votes for a disaster aid declaration, you think twice before deploying your National Guard to occupy cities like Chicago, right, or San Francisco. And there's going to be some very serious consequences. And I appreciate that all of these people believe that Trump is going to pardon them and they have a get out of jail free card, or maybe
100%.
that like the Trump Reich has arrived and we're about to be ruled over by Peter Thiel and the fellas at Andreessen Horowitz. But I don't think so.
Yeah.
And so what every email, record, detail, who those guys were who crashed in the car, who the trigger puller was that shot the priest in the head, we're gonna know. And just like the unmasked drunk ICE agent in the video going around who was stopped for drunk driving and tried to uh, call out the one sheriff for being Haitian, and it's an incredible thing to watch on Substack. They don't look so scary when they're drunk and unmasked, and I
Yeah.
suspect a lot of these guys are drunk when they're unmasked. Last thing about
Classic
Ice
bullies.
Guy in this video that I think everyone should go watch the drunk Ice DUI video on TikTok, wherever you watch this. The ICE agent says to the arresting cop that he's a retired veteran on full disability. So he's on full disability while he's qualified to be an ICE agent. It's insanity. And
Yeah.
and it shows the quality of character and the lack of judgment. And just to bring it back to full circle, Gavin Newsom gets the Good Judgment Award for closing I-5 because a lot of people could have gotten killed by Pete Hegseth this weekend
There's
because
no doubt
there's
about that.
dumber person in this country than that guy,
There's no
which as John McCain used to say, you know, anything is possible in America, and that Pete Hegseth is able to call himself the Secretary of War in front of people, and the room doesn't burst out laughing is one of them. Truly incredible.
Hey, good
Good
conversation.
to see you.
We didn't even get to Christy Nome's, Gulfstream planes. We didn't get to the Bolton indictment. A lot of good stuff.
Talk about Chrissy Nome and Corey Lewandowski and get in the Mile High Club on the taxpayer dime up on the new Gulfstreams for 172 million.
All
Great
right.
stuff.
On that note, great
See
talking
ya.
to you, Steve. Have a good week. See you, everyone.
Bye.